Chapter 3. Hidden Years. There are those who remember their 20s as wild, joyful, and full of social stories. I do not. When I look back, I do not see crowded parties or laughter echoing down memory lane. I see silence. I see trees. I see books spread open under the shade. I see long walks, sometimes barefoot on dusty roads, sometimes under moonlight with thoughts spiraling deeper than words. I remember the ache of questions that had no immediate answers, and moments where the world forgot me, but God didn't. These were not wasted years. They were hidden years. From age 22, my life began to take on a shape that didn't look like anyone else's. While my peers chased relationships, careers, and the excitement of the world, I felt called to something quieter, something deeper. I wasn't running from life, I was chasing meaning. It wasn't rebellion. It was consecration. I had no desire for marriage, no thirst for status or nightlife. Not because those things are wrong, but because my spirit was occupied with something else. I wanted freedom, the kind that doesn't come from wealth or recognition, but from alignment with a deeper truth. I didn't want to escape the world. I wanted to see it not through plain windows or bright lights, but through the eyes of the Spirit. I found my rhythm not in noise, but in stillness. I was building something sacred inside. People misunderstood. Many who crossed my path during that time thought I was lost, antisocial, or wasting time. But I wasn't lost, I was planted. And a planted seed is always misunderstood, until it rises. I was growing roots in a soil no one else could see. Days spent in forests became classrooms. Nature became my sanctuary. The trees did not ask me to explain myself. The wind did not question my silence. The birds did not call me lazy for sitting alone. There, I found my true self, the quiet one who had always been listening. There, I spoke to God without words. There, I wept without shame and dreamed without limit. In those sacred years, I learned to walk without being seen, to grow without applause. I learned how to be alone without being lonely. Then came the dreams. It started around 2017. I began having visions that woke me in the night, some vivid, some symbolic. And always, there were numbers. Not just random digits, but sequences that returned like riddles. 22, then 30. Over and over. They stirred something ancient in me, like a countdown waiting to be understood. Sometimes I'd wake up sweating. Other times I'd wake up with peace, but always with this knowing. These aren't just dreams. I didn't know what they meant, but something in me whispered, write them down. You'll understand later. And so I did. I kept notebooks filled with half-drawn sketches of places I had never seen, timelines I didn't understand, and words that sounded like prophecies. Looking back now, those dreams were not the random flickers of a sleeping mind. They were markings, signposts, clues, evidence that a path had already been prepared long before I understood it. All that time, I hadn't even realized I was being guided. In 2019, The ache inside me became undeniable. Something deep was stirring like a voice I couldn't ignore. It wasn't depression. It wasn't boredom. It was a hunger for something holy. What began that day became a fire that still burns today. But that fire came with cost. One of the hardest things about those years was being misunderstood. I didn't explain much to anyone, partly because I didn't have the words, and partly because I knew they wouldn't understand. People thought I was missing out on life. But they didn't know that I was being set apart for something higher. God often hides his strongest voices in silence. Moses had his desert. David had his fields. Joseph had his prison. Jesus had 30 hidden years before anyone heard his name in public. And I, unknown, misunderstood, yet watched from above, was being formed. There were days I questioned my own path. Days when my bank account mocked me. Days when I felt forgotten even by the dreams I once held close. There were moments I envied those with stable jobs, loud laughter, and planned futures. But each time I tried to go with the flow, something within me resisted. I could not fake normal. I was never made to blend in. At 25, I walked away from a job opportunity that could have paid me well because something in me said, "Not yet." At 26, I moved into a room that had no furniture, just my books, a mattress, and my prayers. At 28, I walked alone more than ever, but also heard from God more clearly than ever. Still, there was no spotlight. No applause. Just obedience. And that obedience became its own reward. I began to see the patterns. Every delay was protection. Every rejection was redirection. Every lonely season was a refining fire. And the more I let go of trying to be understood, the freer I became. I read things most people ignored: old scriptures, ancient wisdom, voices from desert fathers, journals from mystics. And slowly, the pieces came together. I began to understand what the numbers meant. 22 wasn't just my age when the journey started. It was also Isaiah 22 verse 22. I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David. What he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open. 30 wasn't just a future number. It was the year Jesus began his public ministry. I realized I wasn't just waiting. I was being prepared for something divine. And the years were numbered by heaven, not by calendars. If you had seen me then, you may not have noticed anything special. But God did. He sees the roots, not just the fruits. And in secret, he was shaping something eternal. There's a kind of clarity that only comes from pain. There's a kind of strength that only silence can produce. There's a kind of wisdom that can only be learned in the wilderness. So many people want destiny without discipline, glory without growth, calling without crucifixion. But the hidden years are not a punishment. They are preparation. I remember sitting under the same tree for weeks during a dry season of my life, reading the same chapter from Psalms, asking God the same question, "When, Lord?" and I never heard a date. But I always heard the same answer, trust me. And that was enough. Now, looking back, I see what I could not see then. The nights I wept alone, I was not alone. The days I walked in silence, I was being taught to hear. The dreams I wrote down, they were blueprints. The friends who laughed, they made room for my destiny. My 20s didn't leave me with stories of parties or reckless nights. They left me with depth, with truth, with dreams that wouldn't let me go, and questions that led me closer to who I was always meant to become. These were the years I unlearned the noise of the world so I could hear the voice of God. So if you are in your own hidden years, wondering if you've missed your moment, take heart. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not broken. You are being prepared. And when the time comes, you will step into your place with a strength no storm can shake. Because you did not build in public. You built in silence, in surrender, in faith. And what's built in the dark will one day shine in the light.